Hi, welcome to my channel. My name's Leilani. You could also call me Lay. Today I want to do a reading vlog on the book King of Battle and Blood. I've already read about 5 chapters, and what I think I'm going to do is every 5 chapters I'll give you an update. This will be a spoiler vlog, just to let you know. But basically we are in the kingdom of Cordova, and there's 9 houses. But for over 200 years there have been vampires that have plagued the kingdom, and there is, I think it's called the Blood King, who has taken down 2 of the houses of the 9 houses in the kingdom. And at the moment he is at his next house, which is House of Laura, where I don't know actually how to pronounce her name. Isolde? It's Isolde. I'm gonna call her Izzy. But basically Izzy is the princess of House of Laura, and the Vampire King or Blood King is on his way there, and her father is going to make negotiations to make sure his people on his land are safe. When they negotiate, the Blood King asks for Issa's hand in marriage. Like, he's like, well, I want to marry your daughter. And the king's like, no, but she steps up and says yes, she'll do it to save her people. But before that, the king doesn't know that they met previously the morning of the negotiations, because she was basically running away from this commander named Killian, who I currently hate. He is trash. They had a semi-relationship where it was just like hooking up, but he became like very possessive and just a trash man. Okay, he was horrible. But basically they now just got married, and there's a lot of tension between them. They both find each other attractive, and yes, I'm enjoying it so far. This is a very horny book, like right off the bat, very horny. And I was like, ma'am, okay. But I'm excited to see what's next, because Izzy is basically gonna go to Adrian. So that's the Blood King's name is Adrian, and he sounds so hot. But she's gonna go to his kingdom, and yeah, that's all I know. I feel like how there's like a sentence somewhere where he basically says something, like he's like walking her home, like escorting her home, and he says a line, but I think she thinks of another quote to finish it, and then he leaves before she turns around. So I feel like this is one of those books where like they knew each other in their past lives. Is that true? I don't know. That's what I'm getting. I'm also interested in her mother, because it mentions like her mother died before she was born, and her father gave her like this music box that has a lullaby her mom used to sing to her. But I'm enjoying this. So I'm gonna read some more. I think I'm gonna be going over to my friend's house, because I bought her a Lego set for Christmas, even though Christmas is in December. But I was like, I wanna do Legos with you basically, and it's the Starry Night one. I'll put a picture up. But I think it's over 2,000 pieces, and I just want to play with Legos and read this book. So I'll give you an update when I have a new one. Okay, so I haven't read 5 chapters yet, but I just finished chapter 8. Oh my god, let me catch you up. Chapter 6 is basically after the wedding, and the whole chapter is just them honeymooning, you know what I mean? The whole chapter is just sex. There's a lot of tension, a lot of like, I hate you, why am I so attracted to you type of thing. And then chapter 7 is like all the goodbyes to like her kingdom, her father, her friends. But chapter 8, basically you get to know more about Aiden, the Vampire King, and his soldiers. So there's like 4 people that are introduced. But yeah, when they're riding to go to like the next spot to rest, they get attacked, and it turns out they get attacked by Issa's people, and they called her a traitor, and were basically like, you're no longer our princess, and da 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 da. So they try to kill her, and Issa's a bit like devastated, because she doesn't understand how they don't see her side, because she basically sacrificed her happiness and herself to make sure all her people would not get killed by the Blood King. And now there's like these people who are trying to kill her. On top of that, there's like a quote in here where she's talking to Adrian, and she was like basically saying like, aren't you the king of all the monsters? Like he like saying he created all the monsters that are in the kingdoms, because there's other types of monsters that aren't vampires. And he said, let me find it. He said, I am the king of vampires. I am not the king of all the monsters. And then she says, there is no difference. But to me, I feel like vampires have more humanity than the other monsters that have been brought up. But yeah, I love this. I love the writing, the details in the writing. I love the banter between both of them. Adrian's so head over heels for this girl, let's be real. She's the grumpy to his sunshine. There's also a quote I really liked, and she asked Adrian, like, do you miss the sun? And then he responds with, I do not miss the sun, not anymore. And then she says, what if I miss the sun? And then he says, then I will find it for you. And I'm just like, boy, okay. But yeah, I'm just a little bit happy. I really like this book. It's so good. It's so fast paced as well. But yeah, I just keep playing with it. So it's later on at night, and I'm back from my friend's house. We ended up watching Twilight, New Moon, and Eclipse. I didn't build anything for the Lego set because how the instructions are, it only suits like one person to work on it. So I watched her work on it, inserted some footage or whatever. But I do want to let you know I am almost done with the book. I'm more than a little bit halfway through, and I'm still enjoying it. There has been no boring parts. So basically, just to catch up, we now know that Adrian has a vessel, so someone he feeds off of when he is hungry, and Izzy gets a little bit jealous, and she's basically like, don't like that. Like, she doesn't like the fact that she's jealous, but she also doesn't like the fact that he's feeding on somebody else, even though she won't offer himself because she'll feel like a traitor. The vessel, I forgot what her name was, but she got mighty comfortable and basically was saying that her and the queen were the same rank because they're only used for pleasure, and basically threatened her, saying like, if you try to hurt me, I'll tell your husband, type of thing. And Izzy was like, girl, stop. So she told Adrian not to consume her anymore, and he just agreed flat out because he'd do anything for her. They ended up, while traveling, they ended up at another village that was also attacked by the same magic from the previous village that I mentioned. And this time there was a possessed little girl that ended up hurting Izzy and like burned her hand with magic. Then later that day they ended up at the Red Palace because Adrian wasn't able to heal Izzy, so he got somebody named Anna Maria, and she what is his cousin, which is cool. But then there's like talks, like how she was talking and how she looked at Izzy was like they knew each other, but then because she wasn't recognizing who Anna Maria was, she was sad. But then Izzy ended up having like this dream flashback of like her and Adrian in this lake. And then when she woke up, like he was getting her out the bathtub because she fell asleep in the bathtub. And then they were about to have sex, but she ended up stopping it because it felt too close to making love. And she was like, I'm about to be a traitor. And that's where I left off. Also, during the ball, this vampire man, forgot his name, he basically was getting a little bit handsy with Izzy, and she was not liking it, so she stabbed him. And then Adrian came out the cuts and was like, why'd you stab him? And she was like, he touched me. And he was like, okay, chopped off his head. Turns out he's a son of a royal, I think. So now there's like a little bit of threatening stuff that's going to happen in his palace, but then also back at Izzy's land in Laura, or House of Laura, where her dad is at. There was a coup staged by their people, and they were trying to kill him because they think he's a traitor. So that's all of the catch up. I think I'm going to read one more chapter before I go to bed because it's almost 1 a.m. So, yes, talk to you when I have another update. Okay, so it's the next morning, and I've read more than one chapter than I was supposed to. I ended up staying up until like 3 a.m. But I only have 2 chapters left of this book, so I figured it's due time to give you an update. So I think the last I spoke was we've just met Anna Maria, who is a healer, and she's Adrian's cousin. And Adrian and Izzy are still like in their fighting era, so they're not really talking to each other. So the next morning, Izzy wakes up and Anna Maria is like, oh, I'm gonna take you to the garden we have. And the garden's like big and spectacular, and Izzy's loving all of it. But there's a section of the garden that Izzy semi had a dream about because it seems like familiar. Because the previous night, she had a dream about Adrian and her, but it was a different version of Adrian. He was more like relaxed and happy and carefree. But when she woke up, like she was like alone in her bed. So basically, this place reminded her of that dream that she had. And she's like really enjoying the garden, but then like these people pass by her who are like royalties, and they're trying to basically be fake to her, but she understands what fakeness looks like, so she calls them out on it. So they're like, well, you're only going to, like, you're nothing to him, like it's like Adrian doesn't care for you, like he can have sex with anybody he wants, and yada yada yada. So basically she gets upset and is like, I'm about to dip. So during the day she ends up going to this other event where her and Adrian are like sitting down listening to the rest of his kingdom about like any protection they need, any food they need, and then like there's people who ask him for immortality. During this, there's this man who basically offers up his 16-year-old daughter as a concubine to Adrian, and it's like, I'll give you my prettiest daughter if you turn me immortal. Izzy doesn't like that, so she accepts the daughter to take her in, and then she ends up killing the father because he's trash. But she finds out like he's been abusive and like using his family and like disrupting like his villages and stuff. So I feel like every time there's an event, someone gets murdered. And I don't think that's a good thing. But yeah. So then she ends up seeing like more of his kingdom and goes to like the farmer's market and all this other stuff. And she's like learning more about the history of Cordova, of his kingdom, of her kingdom. And then the next day she goes back to the garden, and there's like this pool section, and she basically skinny dips or whatever, and she's like relaxing. And then the royalty guy whose son was murdered basically follows her and then follows her into the water, and he's like, oh, I was just checking up on you, making sure you weren't drowning. And I'm like, boy, you're nasty. But he's been a creep like throughout this book. He's trying to convince her that Adrian isn't a good guy and basically like corrupt her to be like, be on my side. And I think he's trying to like hint at like killing Adrian, but he sucks. We also find out that in a meeting with all of the, I'm gonna just call them high lords. So in all of the meeting with them, they notice that there's other villages that have been plagued by witchcraft, that are like giving out these diseases and like trying to possess people, and spells are going wrong. And they're now think that they're trying to use this spell to possess vampires. And they start talking about the dark era, and there was this witch who would follow around the previous king, but they would kill other witches for fun because the witches wouldn't do what they agreed to because they wanted to like murder people. And you like learn more about the High 12 Witches and what powers they had and what they actually use their powers for good for. But yeah, so Izzy starts having flashbacks of one of these witches, and I was like, oh, I feel like that was her in a previous life. And then you find out that the witch is still alive from the dark era, and she's trying to kill Izzy because she's Adrian's weakness. She does end up getting hurt by the witch. Adrian ends up killing her and stuff. But there's a lot that's happening all at once because you find out there's like a witch trying to kill Izzy. Her father's being attacked by their own people. And then one of the 9 houses has enslaved her mother's village. But it's all happening at once, and Adrian is basically short on staff because he won't turn people immortal unless they have a need for him. So she's like upset because she doesn't want to be a traitor, but she's also like, I want to protect my people. But she also knows like if she asks him to turn people, it's very like hypocritical. So I'm curious to see what's gonna happen in the next 2 chapters. I'm going to make breakfast, read the last 2 chapters, and then start work. But I'll give you an update when I'm done with the book. Okay, so I have finished King of Battle and Blood, and a lot has happened. So in the last few chapters, there's multiple events that happen. And one event that Izzy gets poisoned at like a dinner, like throughout with the whole kingdom. And because she got poisoned, Adrian decides, I'm gonna hold everybody basically hostage in this ballroom until she gets better. And it took like 3 days, and like people were upset at him, and then even like some of the royal court decided to go against him and disrespect him. Adrian ended up killing one of them. The next few days go by. Izzy's father comes in to the Red Palace, and she misses him, and she's happy to see him. And she decides to have a talk with him and ask if he knew about the people who are enslaved in her mother's homeland. And he knew. He didn't tell her. He didn't tell her mother when he knew about it. And he didn't care because he said that they're no longer your people because you were born in my city, basically. So she gets upset. Killian is still jealous of the fact that she is now in love with Adrian, and he calls her out for it. On top of that, her and Adrian finally have like a discussion about how they feel about each other. They end up making love. He ends up biting her consensually, but he warned her if he did that their lives will be bound together, and if she died, he died. And I thought that was so stupid because they still didn't find like this traitor who tried to poison her. And then they're like, she finds out who she really is. So she's basically a reincarnation of his one true love, who was a witch. And the reason why he became a vampire was because he prayed to the goddess to get his revenge on all the people that wronged him and the witches. So he's basically doing all this for himself, but also for her. So she starts remembering her past life, and then another event happens where the city is attacked. So he goes to go fight everybody, but while he leaves, some of the royal court decide to band together and attempt to kill Izzy. And during this attempt to kill her, the Crimson Mist, the magic that's been all over like the land, doing like plague stuff and killing people, has now entered their palace. And yeah, a whole bunch of mess happens. She ends up killing her father because he tries to kill her because she was dumb enough to tell him that if she dies, Adrian dies, and he didn't give a like her dad did not care. He did not care about her. But at the end, we find out that the reason why the witch from the dark era, I keep forgetting her name, it starts with an R. It's kind of like Rebecca, but it's not Rebecca. But basically she needed to steal this book that Izzy made when she was a witch in her past life. And turns out that book brings back the dead. So she's probably going to raise back the old king. I think his name is, I don't know what his old name is, but basically to bring him back, and he's probably gonna like kill everybody. And then they find out there is a traitor amongst the most trusted of Adrian's circle, because only 4 people knew about his curse. Was basically like, if Izzy dies, he dies. So one of them had told the witch from the Dark Era. And now we have to figure out who did it. I think it's either, because it doesn't say. Let me see if I can find their names. So I think it was either, I think it's Anna Maria, Duroc, Soren, and then Tanika. I think it's either Tanika, because we didn't really get mentioned of them in this book, or it's Duroc. So, yes. All in all, I think this was a solid read. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. The reason why I didn't round it up to a 5 stars is because a lot of the problems could have been solved with talking to each other. Because there was no rule against, like, he couldn't say who she was in the past life. But also he could have just talked about his past himself, and it would have sparked like some memories in her. I don't think they're fit to rule a kingdom. Is that mean? I don't think it's mean, because basically every event that they attended, they ended up stabbing or killing someone. So they created a lot of enemies when they really didn't need to. But I'm interested to see what happens in the next book, which I think comes out in December. And yeah, so thank you for watching my vlog. If you have any book recommendations similar to this one, please let me know and I'll check them out. See you in the next video. Bye!